So here's what I do. This is what I think the company is worth. This is where it's trading. And I did this at the end of the fiscal year. We're already sort of close to the end of the next fiscal year, so you really have to do this, shift it in time. But this is what it was trading at the end of the last fiscal year. Okay. Now, you all know how to calculate a return? If it was trading here, and this is the right number, so that the price gets driven to here, then the way I calculate the return is I take that number, what it'll be in a year, divide it by this number, what it was a year ago, and subtract 1, and that's the percent return. Okay. And if I go over here, I do exactly the same thing, except I've got to do that little lousy 1 over t because I've got 3 periods. Okay. Do you know how to do that? If this thing would go up and down, it would be easier. When I turn this off, I'll show you. So I expect Lowe's to have a 16%, 16.5% return this year. But on average, over 5 years, I expect it to return only 6.5%. If I were to buy it here, and it went up to its fair value, my return would only be 6.5%, my price return. Okay. For Home Depot, it would be 7.9%. I can't do it, so I'll do that calculation in a minute. To whatever the price return is, you have to add the dividend yield, because companies pay a dividend. And the way you calculate the dividend yield is you take the dividend and you divide it by the price, and you assume that the company is more or less going to keep the same dividend yield. So to get the total return, I have to add 2%, 2.1% for Lowe's, and 1.9% for Home Depot. I don't know what the dividend yield is for Target or for Kohl's, but it's right there on the first page of the company report. You can always find it. So that gives me the total return. So the question is, if Lowe's is going to return close to 19% this year, do I buy it? If it's going to return 8.6% on average over 5 years, and that's the time horizon that I'm dealing with, do I buy it? Conversely, and the same question I can ask here. And here's what you got to remember. You only buy it. You only buy it if its expected risk-adjusted return is higher than the expected return on the market. Okay? That's what that MP, modern portfolio theory, and that sort of stuff is all about. So that's where this formula about the expected return on a stock should be the expected return on a risk-free asset, a T-bill, plus beta times the difference between the expected return on the stock and the expected return on the T-bill. So if I think this is the T-bill return, and I think the stock market is going to return 10% in 1 year, in 3 years, in 5 years, which is sort of the average return of the stock market over the last 20 years. And I get some estimate of beta, and both of these companies, and it should be true of Kohl's and Target too, should have betas that are close to 1. They go up and down with the stock market and not much more. Then I can calculate what the theoretical expected return for these companies should be. This is what the expected risk-adjusted total return should be for this company and for that company. It's a function of what you think the stock market is going to be, what the beta is, and what the T-bills are. And now, I only buy if that number is bigger than that number. So as a 1-year investment, this looks pretty good. As a 3-year investment, it's okay. As a 5-year investment, not so good, but, you know, maybe about the market. This one is a 1-year investment, okay, not so good. So with these kinds of numbers, you'd say, okay, this makes sense to me as sort of a medium-term investment. I'll buy it with a 3-year horizon, okay, because what I expect the return to be is higher than what the risk-adjusted return is. Now, one of the interesting things that happens when you do this is you can start fiddling around with the numbers and see what really affects what's going on here. And in this particular case, the two numbers that I have that were impacting the company's sales growth were housing starts and stores. Okay? And I thought that if I changed my assumptions about how many stores they had, that it would affect my decision here. And I was surprised to find out it really didn't. You know, it changes the numbers, but it really didn't change the story. On the other hand, if housing came roaring back, and nobody expects housing to come roaring back, but if housing comes back a lot faster than what people think, then this becomes a screaming buy, and this one not so much. So one of the things that you can do when you get through with all this stuff is to say, what really matters for this company? And in this case, what really matters is how quickly the industry recovers, the housing industry recovers. So I know that's an awful lot, but that's sort of the progression through here. And, you know, as always, I will leave the spreadsheet. But I want to